Hello, this is Steven and yes, we're back with another Harry Potter movie review. Today, we'll be reviewing the 2004 film Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. Now, before we get into the cast and before we get into the actual movie and my thoughts, let's get into a bit of background. Now, there's a bit of something that happened between the second and third film in the series. Christopher Columbus, who directed the first two installments of the Harry Potter series, pretty much stepped down from directing. From what I managed to find out, his reason why, because he felt that honestly he couldn't continue without Richard Harris, who was playing the Albus Dumbledore character, so he decided to step down. And as a result, they brought in Alfonso Cuarón, probably butchering that entire name, was brought on to direct this film. Now, this film completely changed a bit of the tone of the series in my opinion, and I think it's really where the more what you think of Harry Potter, I think really came more from this film, with the more, and the director himself was more known for artsy type thing, and he wanted to essentially bring his own unique stamp to the series. He also wanted this film that could be, even though it is connected to the other films, it's sort of also a kind of a standalone film that, even though it's connected and does help progress a bit of the story and some characters in further future films, it also had a way of just standing out. So already there was a bit of talk because of that. I managed to find out he was very good behind the scenes with a lot of the cast, and really also had the kid actors with their school uniforms change up a bit, because they're slightly getting more teen years, so they are kind of dressing a little bit differently because they are becoming more adultish. So their dress senses change differently. So automatically, this film was to be something special. But the question remains: is it special? Well, let's get into the cast. Our famous three trios are back. Daniel Radcliffe, Rupert Grint, and Emma Watson are all back as Harry Potter, Ron Weasley, and Hermione Granger, respectively. Also here changing up, we have our new Dumbledore, and he's to many people their favorite, Michael Gambon, who took over after the late Richard Harris died. I'd say, now I'll be honest, Richard Harris for me is the Dumbledore for me, because again, I watched the very first two films, and for me, that's how I imagine Dumbledore would be. But I give credit to Michael Gambon, who managed to make the role his own and stand out, and also manages to really make the part his own. And there's also something about the costume design around this time, with the new director. The costume design for many of the characters really changed, and honestly, I felt it worked pretty well for the majority here. Really did well. We have, of course, Rubeus Hagrid back, still portrayed by the great Robbie Coltrane, who is, all awesome and absolutely great as always. We have, of course, all the members of the Weasley family, all back. Fred and George, Mr. and Mrs. Weasley, Ginny, Percy, you name it. Again, they're kind of more supporting character roles, but the twins will essentially play a bit of a role in the story, and especially Arthur Weasley, Mr. Weasley, definitely plays a bit of a role in the story, and I think it really is good that they change it, because I'll explain a bit more, but it really also shows just how much of they view Harry as essentially another member of the family. We also here have the caretaker, Mr. Filch, portrayed by David Bradley. Again, I remember him from him doing his own take of the first Doctor in the 12th Doctor's final episode. Again, and he's back, a bit of a small role, but I kind of get the feeling that he, really is there, is really there for the school, even though I think he kind of hates the kids, and he's you're supposed to be that person that's scary. There is a soft spot for that character. It's always pop up, mostly for comedic moments, but also for a bit sinister moments, which I really like. Of course, we have other people. We have some new faces and old faces. Let's start with some of the new ones. First off, Gary Oldman is in this film, and he portrays Sirius Black. Now, Gary Oldman is a phenomenal actor. He is just a fantastic performer. So the fact that we got him in this film at all is surprising to me. That he would actually sign up for this film really shocked me. And his character is more complex as the series went on, and especially and he definitely stole the show in his first outing, which is absolutely great. We also have the character of Lupin. Let me check. Yeah, Remus Lupin, portrayed by David Thewlis. And essentially he's the new Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher. There's a bit more interesting to his character that connects these two characters. Well, these three characters have a connection to Harry Potter's family, and we can't wait to see that further explored. Now, you heard me say three characters. Well, there is. Here we have Peter Pettigrew, better sometimes nicknamed Wormtail, portrayed by Timothy Spall. And he is going to be a very interesting character, and essentially, I call him the Joe Chill of the Harry Potter universe. Why? Because, for me, he's kind of the character that set in stone the series. So that's what I mean. Just like a Joe Chill was responsible for the death of Batman's parents, making Bruce to become Batman, this character led certain events to the creation of the entire Harry Potter series. Alan Rickman is back as Professor Snape, still fantastic as ever. We have Dudley is back, Dudley is back, still portrayed by the same actor from the previous film. We have Cornelius Fudge back again, still portrayed by the same guy from the previous film, which honestly just goes to show for me just how much they really do stick with continuity in this film, in the film series in general. And he's still portrayed by Robert Hardy, and he's the Minister of Magic. We get a bit more of him here, but honestly, surprisingly, he's kind of a little bit likable. We see his faults, but they won't be more prevalent until later films. And honestly, this is where I think he really got to be stuck more within the whole Harry Potter community. We have Professor Minerva Mcgonagal, still portrayed by Maggie Smith. Honestly, always a fun addition every time she pops up. And I will admit, her role is kind of condensed a little bit, but she does reveal a shocking bombshell, and I absolutely love it. Also, surprisingly, when I saw this film for the first time, I was shocked that we got Dawn French, of all people, in this film as the fat lady, and she took over the role from the previous actress in the first film, actually. So this is the character kind of makes a comeback. She's more comedic. Now, for those who don't know this actress, I do. I remember her from Vicar of Dibley, which was a show that Mum and Dad pretty much brought on the telly one time, and I got hooked on it. It was funny as hell, and the fact that she appeared, I was shocked that she was in this film. Still am the fact they got her, but this just shows us how British this film series is. It brings British actors and stage actors and TV actors all in for this film. It's absolutely phenomenal they got her. And also this is where she again brings more comedic to the film, and again this film itself is arguably more of the comedic slapstick that the series would later develop became more prevalent in this film and established the series its own sense of humor, which is all great. Rounding out our remaining cast, we have the rest of the Dudley family, with Vernon and Petunia, yep, all making their return here, along with Marge, who happens to be Vernon's sister. Of course, we have Crabbe and Goyle all back. We have Dean Thomas, Neville Longbottom, Seamus, Professor Flitwick, and he gets a brand new design here this time around, and it will carry on to later films the same way like how Dumbledore got a new look too, will also be carried on. We also here have a brand new teacher that would play mostly small roles in the films to follow. The teacher's name is Still Bill Trenway, probably butchering that name. She's portrayed by Emma Thompson, and she's this essentially new teacher. She essentially is a fortune teller type teacher and predicts and does predictions and plays a little bit of a role in the story a little bit. And she would have began to appear in later films, mostly in small roles, like most of the rest of the cast would. Yes, that's pretty much the main cast out of the way. With that, let's get on to the film. We begin the film with the usual opening, but it's also done rather differently, as we see Harry in his room, essentially trying to practice magic. Now, he's underage, you're not supposed to. That's kind of the thing that I think they kind of lose on the films, underage magic, and ironically, Harry and some of the other characters have gotten away with that in several films, so, you know, I'm surprised they still keep doing it. Anyway, we move on to that, to essentially we're opening with Marge coming to visit, who is Vernon's sister. And in the scenes that followed, again, just like the rest of the Dudley family, they don't like Harry. Harry's treated poorly. He's we see like he's practically a slave, you know, forced to do like this kind of chore as soon as she's here. And also during the scene, Harry's trying to get Vernon to, you know, sign papers for some like field trip, no doubt during the year. But he says later if he behaves. Eventually, during the whole thing, you know, Marge asks essentially about the boy's parentage. You know, where he goes to school. Of course, they lie saying he goes to a strict boarding school where he apparently gets punished all the time. But she eventually starts calling his father, Harry's father, a drunk, which Harry gets very angry at. And this causes the glass to break. A branded glass she's having to break, and then she eventually starts calling a mother a bad thing, and eventually Harry loses it, telling her to shut up. Now again, he is a young kid, and he's magic, so eventually something happens, causing her to essentially inflate, and she floats up into the air. It's done both in a serious way, but also comedic. Again, the film does establish a bit of its own comedic premise. And honestly, it's a fun scene. It also shows you the tone we're going with this time around, but also the cinematography is going in a different direction this time around. Eventually, this causes Harry to run upstairs, pack his stuff, and begins to leave. Even when Vernon tries to stop him, telling her to bring her back, he says no. And when Vernon is clearly about to choke him, he quickly gets out his wand and pretty much tells them to stay back. Even though he says, you're not going to let him go back to school. He's got nowhere to go. He says, well, anywhere's better than here. So he quickly leaves, goes into, and essentially ends up at some kind of playground with this mysterious, spooky atmosphere, which honestly, this is what the film established, a little bit of a darker tone of the series. And I think it more started with this film. And I think it will be passed on into the next installment. Eventually, a bus turns up, and it turns out it's a special witch night bus, which picks up the homeless witches and wizards, and Harry is brought on board. He's still suspicious, as he knows there's something just in the air that's just not right. As he gets on the bus, they end up going through all of London, and it's a really funny scene because the bus is going at a super speed. It blends with some dark comedy and slapstick humor really well. It also opens up the storyline as Harry sees a newspaper, and one of the people informs him that in the newspaper that a notorious mass murderer by the name of Sirius Black has escaped. And before he can know any bit more about him, he is told that he used to be a big supporter of you-know-who, this meaning Lord Voldemort. Interesting fact, Voldemort does not appear in this film. Making the first film in the franchise, he's often referenced, but he doesn't actually make a full proper appearance, making this one film more of a standalone, which is very different and interesting. This eventually leads to Harry, the night bus, stopping at the Leaky Cauldron, which is where Harry asked to go. And there he gets out and he meets the Minister of Magic, Cornelius Fudge. Cornelius Fudge then reveals to him that the whole matter has been cleared of the underage magic, even though he says he should be in trouble. It's like, oh, come on, it was just an accident. But he told him that it was irresponsible for him to run out when there's a criminal on the loose. Harry means Sirius Black. And he's asked, well, what does that have to do with him? Obviously, Cornelius Fudge knows something, but he says, oh, nothing, it's just common sense. Even though, to be fair, this is the first time Harry's even hearing about Sirius Black. He just found out on the bus, and he knows very little other than he's a notorious criminal and was a follower of the Dark Lord Voldemort. However, he's told everything's straight now, but you must stay here until it's time to go to school. And of course, we get a little funny scene of Harry, with essentially a book coming alive and attacking him. Again, a bit of its more comedic, dark moments, and I think the film balanced them that well. Eventually, Harry ends up meeting Ron, Hermione, who are arguing the fact that Hermione's cat. Harry also ends up meeting the rest of the Weasley family, and essentially it's like what they would occasionally do in some of these films. Every time Harry interacts with essentially the Weasley family, it's a nice work on breath of fresh air, because really Harry never really got acceptance from his actual blood-related family, but he did from essentially Ron's family, but also friends of his parents. And this scene also is nice, but it also takes a dramatic turn when Arthur asks to speak Harry alone, and he tells him that he must keep this to himself, as the Ministry does not want him to know this. But Sirius Black is essentially after Harry, because why? Well, Sirius Black was a servant to the Dark Lord, and essentially Voldemort fell, and he was incarcerated. Sirius Black is one of those people that truly believes Voldemort is still alive, and Harry is preventing him from his return to power. So for his sake, don't go looking for Black. Stay out of this. I like how ultimately that just sets up this whole conflict of him trying to find Sirius Black. And I absolutely just love the one shot they do with this whole scene, and how it smoothly transitions to essentially platform 9, 1 3/4, 9 and 3 1/4, whatever. It transitions very well to that scene, and as Harry, Ron, and Hermione are on the train off to Hogwarts, first off, Harry informs the gang about everything, and they're all shocked because, first off, they know Sirius Black. They're shocked he's coming after them, but they still can't figure out one mystery. How did he get out of Azkaban? As he is officially the first prisoner on record to ever escape, and that's a first. On their way to Hogwarts, the train suddenly stops, and it's cold. The atmosphere, it's cold, it's freezing, and it's building up suspense. And it's a good reason why, because we're introduced to one of the most iconic things, not just this film, but also what's also a part of the Harry Potter series, of the Dementors, these ghostly figures that come in, and they essentially end up attacking Harry. But he is saved at the last minute by what looked like a homeless person, and this person happens to be Remus Lupin, who saves Harry from this Dementor. Harry also has delusions as what he has seen, and he just doesn't know what is going on, but Remus helps him recover and gives some chocolates for him to quickly, get back on his feet. He then ends up leaving the compartment. We then get this nice shot from the train to Hogwarts, and into the Great Hall, where first off, where there's this nice little orchestra, double toy and trouble song. It's just a really great piece of music they've made, and this eventually leads to the introduction to the new Albus Dumbledore, portrayed by Michael Goldman. And honestly, he gives his own unique stance on the role. Like I said before, Richard Harris will always be my favorite version of Dumbledore, but I can see why many people love this version, and I think he managed to make the role his own, but stays true to what Dumbledore really is. He introduces Remus Lupin as the new Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher, but he also introduces that Hagrid would now be the professor of magical creatures lessons. And I like how everyone, especially the Gryffindor students, are more than happy to have him be leading the class. He also informs the students that Dementors will be around Hogwarts outside the grounds to capture Sirius Black, and he warns them to not go near the Dementors because, well, they will not, as they can easily mistake for those innocents as for the criminals, the person they're hunting, and the ones who get in their way. We eventually lead to a scene where essentially they go to where the Gryffindors go to the common room with the fat lady, where Dawn French absolutely gives a funny performance, and is definitely for me, one of the highlights of the film. And we lead into a bit of, again, more, I guess I would say, minor stuff, such as, the boys just mucking around in the bedroom, and then we eventually lead to the students having their lesson in fortune telling, and it builds a bit of suspense, but then ends with a bit of a comedic note, and it also reveals that Harry is in danger. Then again, isn't he always? It's a reason why the film series is called Harry Potter. We eventually lead to the magical creatures lesson, where we're introduced to Buckbeak, this sort of horse-type bird creature hybrid, and it leads into Harry developing a bond with the creature because Hagrid is teaching the lesson, and eventually it would lead to Draco getting injured because Draco, being essentially a bully, feeling he's superior to everyone, gets hurt, and he blows it way out of proportion. We also get a scene that Sirius Black has been spotted near, closer to the Hogsmeade area, and realizing that he can make his way into Hogwarts, and they know that there's a possibility because he escaped Azkaban, and he's the first one to ever done it. We then go to the Fence Against the Dark Arts lesson, which the series always intended to do, at least I would say for the first 5 installments. They kind of dropped that, I think, aspect in the latter films, I'd say the last 3 films of the series. And here we see Lupus is actually a great teacher, and I like how he's giving confidence, especially to all the characters, to really then face their fears. And especially to Neville. Because honestly, Neville was the one student you always got the feeling was always picked on. I would not just by Slytherins, but I'd say even by some Gryffindors, I would say. With the exception of, I would say, Harry, Ron, Hermione, and Dean, with Dean, Seamus, Ginny. I think are the only real, and even the rest of the Weasleys who are part of Gryffindor, I think were the only exceptions to not tease poor Neville. And I like how it's just, we see the character, really Lupus, like what he is. He's a great teacher, but he's also really helping Harry with him to control Dementors as they seem to affect him the most. And we see scenes of that throughout the film with him trying to, teach him the Patronus, bit of the Patronus charm, which is used to repel Dementors. We also get a scene of the Quidditch game, which is being done in the rain. Honestly, I don't know why they would do it in the rain, but then again, they do it when football. They still play a football game when it's raining, so I guess throw caution to the wind. And it's between, ironically, not between Gryffindor and Slytherin, but it's actually between Gryffindor and Hufflepuff. And just when Harry's about to get the golden snitch, he is attacked by a Dementor, and he essentially was almost falling to his death, but is saved at the last minute by Albus Dumbledore. However, his broom has been destroyed, and even though Hufflepuff, and we assume Hufflepuff won the match, it's even implied that they did, but from what I gather, it was a fair game despite that incident. And we get this and that's really, but we pick up a bit more of the plot when we find out that Sirius Black had supposedly broken into the school. He supposedly broke into the school, scratched up a bit of the portrait of the fat lady, who went into hiding, and she is now, and says that the person who did it, who caused this, was Sirius Black. The school is then immediately under lockdown. Everyone is scared, and also interesting fact, when everyone's and essentially it was brought to, the Great Hall, they're all sleeping in there, and there was an interesting behind-the-scenes story where Alan Rickman, of all people, played a prank on Daniel Radcliffe. They can actually see a video on YouTube, and it's funny as hell, and when I see it, I find this is Snape, the actor Snape, being funny in real life, because he's always the complete opposite. More things also occur in the film, such as they want to go to Hogsmeade on a trip. Year 3s and up can go, but Year 3s have to have a permission slip. Harry doesn't have a permission slip signed, courtesy what happened early in the film, so he tries to use his invisibility cloak to get away, but is stopped by the Weasley twins, who give him the Marauders Map, a group of and it said that they found it. It was made by a group of students who lived here. And essentially, the Marauders Map was made by 4 former students at Hogwarts, and essentially the Marauders Map is used for secret passageways in and outside the castle. Harry uses this to get outside the castle to go to Hogsmeade. On his way there, he, ends up helping Hermione and Ron from essentially being attacked by Draco and 2 other members of the Slytherin house who essentially are trying to bully them. And he does it by manipulating the fact that, because they're near like an old shrieking shack and it's rumored to be haunted, he uses that to pretend, that it is haunted, dragging them towards the shrieking shack, and they end up, running away. But Ron and Hermione easily know it's Harry. Now, there was a scene where it was just like throughout the film, it's hinting that Ron and Hermione are having like chemistry towards each other, possibly to be a romantic couple. Again, something that was hinted in the second film, and little hints there, and more hints are going to be just put out throughout the films that go on. Can't wait to see where we go with that. As they go through Hogsmeade, they see a Cornelius Fudge going into the 3 brooms, Sticks talking about Sirius Black, and Harry wants to know more, ends up sneaking in through the invisibility cloak, but Ron and Hermione, prevent on stopping him from entering, and they are told to go away. Harry is now inside the room where the PM, McGonagall, and the innkeeper all talk about Sirius Black. They find out that Sirius Black was finding a few things out. Once he killed a man named Peter Pettigrew, who happened to be a friend of not just Sirius Black, but also James and Lily Potter. And he was believed to have been killed, but the only thing still missing is his finger. That was all that thing that was left of him of that time. He killed him because he killed not just him, but also a bunch of innocent muggles. And even worse, it's said that Sirius Black sold Lily and James out to Voldemort. And even more shocking is that Sirius is Harry's godfather. And Harry is shocked. The person that sold his family out was his godfather. And this is what they've been keeping from him. Sirius Black knew Harry, and in this build-up with so much rage, he ends up sneaking out, and Ron and Hermione end up finding him and try to comfort him with how, of the revelation of what has happened, and he says he's gonna find Sirius Black and he's going to kill him no matter what. Interesting character change there, and honestly very interesting for the story. Something more we get with the story that more unfolds is the Buckbeak incident. We catch up with that storyline as he's been sentenced to death thanks to Lucius Malfoy's influence and to get payback. We also find out that the rat, Ron's pet rat was missing, and they believe that Hermione was responsible for the cat was responsible for its death, but of course we find out not. Also, another scene that happened is at night, Harry ends up going throughout the Hogwarts, at night, and he gets caught after hours by Snape, who, takes the Marauders Map off him, and we get a hint that Remus and Snape have a bit of history. Remus confiscates the map off him, but we also find out on the map that the name Peter Pettigrew popped up, and he doesn't know what caused it. So that's another mystery. Something definitely is going on here, and this is definitely more shown with another mystery added into the kinks, is Snape ends up teaching the Defense Against the Dark Arts when Remus is not aware, and he ends up teaching something completely off topic, a werewolf. And the whole thing about that. So how's that going to play into the story? Also, another thing that's been happening throughout the story is apparently Hermione's been turning up to certain classes, but see, then what's weird about it is this: when a certain class takes place, she supposedly was said to be in another class. She's been literally, it's almost like she's been 2 places at once. She's popping up randomly, and Ron's noticing this, and even Harry's starting to question it, but Ron definitely more notices. But anyway, let's get back to the execution of Buckbeak, which kind of happens. We find, but Hagrid reveals that Scabbers, Ron's pet rat, has been found, and gives it to Ron. And as the 3 walk away, three essentially walk away, they run into Draco and Malfoy, who, are going to watch the Buckbeak get hurt, executed. Hermione comes up to Draco and essentially uses a wand pointed at him, and they say, "Don't, Hermione, he's not worth it." She then lowers his wand. Just as he lets out a laugh, Hermione turns around and punches him straight in the face. It was a shocking moment, but one that felt oddly satisfying. And essentially, Draco and his two friends run away, and even though and Hermione says that felt good, was like, good? That was brilliant. They eventually go and watch, sadly, even though they don't, sadly, the unfortunate execution of Buckbeak. At least they think they did. And I'll explain a bit more. Eventually, Scabbers ends up biting Ron's hand and runs away, with the trio eventually chasing after Ron, with Ron chasing after Scabbers, leading to the great willow tree. And I like how Harry instantly stopped, because he knows what that tree does. Remember from the second film, when the car getting beaten up in that tree? That's where they're going near. This eventually leads to essentially going underneath the willow tree with some kind of passage. I don't know how they managed to find their way, but they did. Eventually they go into what turns out to be actually a passage to the Shrieking Shack. And there, the trio, with Ron being badly mauled because he was dragged there by some kind of dog. And there he comes face to face with Sirius Black. And more mysteries begin to unfold as Remus Lupin pops up. At first, Remus pops up. Just as Harry was essentially about to strangle Sirius Black, he breaks it up. And it looks like Lupus is in cahoots with Sirius. But he says before they do whatever they have to do, Harry needs to know everything. He has the right to know why. Harry says he knows that Sirius killed his parents. And Remus says, no, he did not. Someone else killed his parents. Someone he thought was dead. Peter Pettigrew. He is alive and in this room right now. And then Snape happens to appear at one point and plans to take Sirius Black back to the Dementors. But Harry secretly takes Hermione's wand, with some help with Ron and Hermione in on the plan, and stupefies Snape, and asks to explain more. It turns out that Sirius was actually set up. He did not kill those muggles. It was done by Peter Pettigrew. Also, he did not sell out the Potters. It was Peter Pettigrew. He did it, and he's in this room. Besides, where is he? Sirius points to Ron's pet rat, Scabbers. And he says, what? Think about it. You've had that for 12 years. Quite a long time for a common Irish rat. He's missing a toe, isn't he? And Peter Pettigrew, the only thing they could find of him was a finger. They end up taking the rat and turning it back into its human form. And here we reveal Peter Pettigrew. At one point, and is being held at one point. He tries to run away, but Sirius and Lupin, with Gary Oldman giving a fantastic performance, along with Remus Lupin, the Remus Lupin character, also a great performance, holding up one point, saying how he sold James and Lily out to Voldemort. And Peter says he didn't mean to, but with everything he possessed, if Sirius was in his place, what would he have done? But he says, I would have rather have died. And I like how the both did plan to kill Voldemort, Peter Pettigrew, right there and there for what they did to James and Lily. But Harry steps in saying, no, we'll take him back to the castle. And I like how, throughout the thing, we see what Peter is. He's the snuggling little coward who sort of curls up or coils around, essentially, those that he views are more powerful than him. He likes being the servant. His loyalty to really is no one, to no one. He doesn't believe in kind of friends or that, and really just likes to coil up to those, who have power. Which is very interesting for a character. It makes you really despise him. The actor just does a phenomenal job. But like Harry says, we're not going to kill him. We're going to take him back to the castle. After that, the Dementors can have him. And just that face expression. They take Sirius and Lupin take both the injured Ron, Harry, Hermione, and Peter Pettigrew away. Out through the tunnel. And there's a moment where Harry and Sirius begin to bond a bit, because this will be definitely explored furthermore in other films. And it's mostly because Harry just reminds Sirius of James. He looks so much like him. And something we're always told, that how Harry has inherited a lot of his parents' quality. his mother's eyes, but he has this spitting image of his father. Just as they're taking Peter away, something begins to happen. It's a full moon, and it's revealed that Remus is actually a werewolf, and Hermione was the one to figure it out, which explains why Snape taught the lesson to reveal Lupus's secret. And just as that's happening, he's turning into a werewolf. Peter uses the opportunity to make his escape, and Snape comes out to protect the kid. Eventually, both Sirius and Lupus are taken down. But ironically, Sirius Black was about to be, given the Dementors kiss, which essentially is you the catatonic state, but is saved. But Harry doesn't know why. They're all back at Hogwarts, but things are still not quite right. Ron is in the infirmary, but even though the kids are telling Professor Dumbledore everything, Sirius was innocent of the crime. Peter Pettigrew was really responsible. Why is he still in custody? Well, there's really no evidence. Not even with the other eyewitness accounts, and obviously, rather doing that, they have Sirius Black. They'd rather not do that, but they still plan to essentially execute the poor guy. However, Dumbledore does give Hermione an idea, but Harry doesn't catch on what he's suggesting. And Hermione reveals a little trick. Why she's been going to so many classes this year. She's been using what is known as a time turner. And essentially, it's kind of used to go backwards and forwards in time. And they use this device to go back in time. And it's also revealed that and as a result, how the scenes of transform back in time is actually quite interesting. They go back in time and ultimately end up saving Buckbeak and follow the events of what we've been seeing with the up till the Peter Pettigrew stuff and all the way to where Sirius Black is about to get to the Dementor kiss, and he is saved. Harry thought that his father came and saved him, or the ghost of his father, he presumed, but it actually wasn't. It was Harry. Harry himself. He saw his future self and thought that it must have been his father because of the delirious state. He managed to use the Expectus Patronus charm to save Sirius Black from being given the Dementor's kiss. Along with Buckbeak, they end up essentially saving Sirius Black when, they made that, Sirius Black escaped and send him away. The nice little scenes where Harry interacts with Sirius Black is phenomenal. Both actors give a phenomenal performance, and also it helps establish the character's dynamic and relationship, because the two... See, Sirius Black, I always thought he saw both his father and his mother in him, and is the last connection to his old friends. And Harry sees Black as the father figure, another father figure that he wished could have been, and in many ways his last proper family that he knows generally cares about him, and vice versa, because he didn't get that from the Dursleys, and the closest thing he got to an actual family was with the Weasleys, but he's not related to them. So this made it very interesting, and that would again be built on in later films. Again, everything's then restored when they go back to where they came from the original, when the time turner began. There's a little funny moment from Ron says, "What just happened?" And they give a little cheeky, one-liner. It eventually ends with, the film ends with Harry ironically getting a mysterious present, a new broom, the latest thing, and it's clearly hinted it was by Sirius Black, and it ends the scene with Harry riding the broom, having the time of his life. That's where we end the film. I don't mind the ending, but it's alright. It's alright. And honestly, it's a nice ending to conclude in a film which I consider a standalone. Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, definitely often in the top 3 of the best films of the series, declared as by some fans to be the best film in the series. Let's look at some things. Let's look at the positives. First off, the cinematography, camera work is definitely, from a cinematic standpoint, an absolute masterpiece. It established the tone of the series as it was getting darker by this time around. I like it's a standalone. It's kind of, you could watch it without having to see the first 2 films. You can understand what would have happened in the first 2 films, and it also will kind of build you up to watch more of the film to set up for future sequels. I feel they did a phenomenal job with that, in my opinion. And some of the acting is here. First off, Gary Oldman as Sirius Black, and the character Remus Lupin, honestly some of my favorite characters of the series. And honestly, both are father figures to Harry, but I also like the misleading of Sirius Black to be the villain. I mean, he has a name that screams he would be the bad guy, but he doesn't. So I like that little turnaround. Now, Now, the question, and I was genuinely surprised by the twist. I love the cinematic, and I can see why many people say this is the best one of the series. I think this kind of shares in common with Goldfinger. Think about it. They were the third films of their respective franchise, Harry Potter and James Bond. They're both considered the gold standard, in many ways, for the series. And when you think of the series, you think of the third film. It also established its own tone that would define the series, with Harry Potter being getting more darker and being more darker as the series went on, mostly because the kids are now growing up and becoming more teenagers and less of these little kids that we saw in the first two films. So I think they did well in that department. And honestly, I think it's great on that standpoint. But do I consider it the best? Not really. It's definitely in the top 4 for me. It's in the top 4. But I don't consider it my personal favorite. And why is that? Honestly, for me, what doesn't work is some of the comedy. And honestly, some of the comedy was started in here with the slapstick that honestly the series would do. Sometimes it worked, but sometimes it didn't. And that's another thing. Also, some of the acting here. Now, again, I felt Daniel Radcliffe as Harry Potter was really tested in this one, and it worked most of the time, except for maybe that scene when he was saying he was going to kill Sirius Black with that anger. You could really feel he's in the emotion, but something also felt off. It balanced the tightrope of being overdone, but in the moment. I don't know. It just felt wonky at times, or even at best. Another thing is Ron's uselessness. Honestly, I think by this film, Ron became more of the comic relief was done to a full extent, only rivaled by Neville. But he also became the third wheel, and that's kind of a shame. True, he was a bit of a comic relief in the second, but he always balanced out by being somewhat useful. But however, I will admit, because he was more of that, they wanted to give more of the limelight to Hermione in the third one. So I actually like that they kind of went with that direction. I also feel this is where they probably started the idea of Harry and Hermione being a thing. I never bought that. There were scenes clearly to indicate she would end up, that her and Ron have they might have a more romantic connection, but I never got that with Harry. I understand that she was the brain of the group, but I feel that it can be a little too overused, and as a result, it felt like Ron was becoming the third wheel of the group and almost being pushed aside, kicked out, which felt bad. I don't know, it felt really bad for his character. And that's the thing I kind of feel they go with in the later films. I will be honest there. Another thing I also don't like about the film, the time travel aspect. It's used once and done. And it's also hinted that it's a magic that is very rare, you can't use, and you can't go back in time and say you're a time traveler because that would ruin time travel. I don't know, for me time travel, shouldn't really work in this context. I'll give it credit, it does work, and it's only used for this one film, and it's never brought up again, but then again, you have it once. Why couldn't maybe Voldemort's followers have gone back in time and used that to destroy Harry in the past? I don't know. So it leaves that up in the air for me. I wouldn't mind in a future film they could do time travel, but then again, it would be relying too much on a gimmick and less of the story. It sounds like being critical, but I have to be. Because this whole review is a complete subjective and personal opinion. I like this film from a cinematic standpoint. I feel it has some great acting, and we're given so many interesting characters. Sirius Black, Remus Lupin, great father figures and family to Harry that he never really got. And Peter Pettigrew is an interesting villain. Because why? Unlike others that for power or respect, he's just a Weasley little sniveling and a literal rat who will literally back up who's ever more powerful than him and be their follower until maybe that person died. And it's even more tragic when you find out that Peter used to be friends with Black, James, and Remus in their childhood. They were friends. They were the original Marauders. Something was left out of the film. They were the Marauders. They were best friends in school, and they were all these kind of hybrid type animals. See, Remus was a werewolf by a disease that he got in his youth. But James, Sirius, Peter became animagus, people that can transform into animals, so that way Remus can have friends. when he's a werewolf, so they can help him, calm him down. And ironically, the animal is the shape of their personality. Black got a dog, which makes sense because he's a dog. Because dogs are known to be loyal, the loyal and the man's best friend. Peter was obviously a rat because he would turn tail and run or backstab people to, be those, and would rather look up to those more powerful than him and be a part of their inner circle rather than anything else. And James was I think a deer. Not sure entirely why or the reasoning behind that, but I'm sure you can write down in the comments. I felt that would have been nice if they could have put that in the film, and it really explored a little bit what James was like. Also, I realized something I might have left out in the film. Remus was expelled from his Defense Against the Dark Arts post because it was revealed he was a werewolf, and he left. But he left on good terms. Now it should be meant he resigned. He got fired, but he resigned, and Albus gave him the job because obviously they go way back. He left, but he left on good terms with Harry, and essentially a bond was formed, and he won't be back until the 5th film, which will be quite a while. And it was probably hinted that Snape probably leaked the news, probably due to bitterness, and we'll find out more in the later films why. Is there anything else I should bring up about this film? Yes. Like I said, the comedy works, but sometimes it doesn't. It's a cinematic masterpiece. The idea of the Harry Potter film came from this film alone. And I think all the actors do a reasonably good job, and I like how it's It's kind of a standalone. It's both connected, but you don't have to watch the previous films to enjoy it, and keep up with the story. You can just watch it as a standalone and enjoy it. But it also tells you what's happened in previous films and possibly sets you up to watch the next films to come, which honestly is a perfect way to go. Honestly, this film is definitely. I can see why many people like this. I'm not hugely fond of it like others, but I do like it nonetheless, and I do find it a very good film, and a good direction to take the series. And that's all I can say. And there we have it. That was Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. That was the 3rd film in the series, and honestly changed the series, I believe, for the better. After this film, even though it was given massive praise, and is often considered by many hardcore fans to be the best one of the series, with a budget of 130 million and grossed 796.2 million at the box office, presumably worldwide. Even though it was the 2nd highest grossing film of the year, but from what I've been able to find, it was, I think it's the lowest grossing film in the franchise, despite the fact it's being mostly hailed as the best film of the franchise. The director Alfonso Cuarón, I'm probably butchering that name, so sorry, stepped down, and he left resulting in new director Mike Newell being hired to essentially direct the next film installment, Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, and that'll be our next film to review in this franchise. So until then, this has been the Stephen Hour, and ladies and gentlemen, thank you for watching. So long for now.